Open up a tab, grab a seat, and pour a pint. It's time for the Beer Guys Radio Show.
You want free beer? Go to the brewery.
Dedicated to the art, science, and enjoyment of craft beer.
Yeah, what's wrong with the beer we got?
Now, here are your hosts, Tim Dennis and Aaron Williams.
And welcome to the Beer Guys Radio Show. We are radio for the local craft beer movement, broadcasting live from Monday Night's Garage in Atlanta, Georgia. And I'm Aaron Williams.
And I'm Tim Dennis. We've got Brian Hewitt with us, as always. Brian, how you doing?
I am doing well. How are you guys?
I'm good, man. I'm good. And today it's another homebrewing show. And today we are going to be talking about common off flavors in your home.
Yeah.
We've got some awesome folks here to talk with us today. Both are Bjcp certified beer judges. We have Mike Castagno, who's actually a Grandmaster beer judge. Correct, Mike?
Yeah, that's right.
And Mike's also the head brewer at Twain's Brewpub here in Atlanta. And we have Nate Watkins with us as well. Nate, how you doing?
Hey, good. Glad
Good.
to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us, guys.
Thanks for inviting us.
By popular demand, we're going to have a homebrewing show. We get
homebrewing show.
We get a
We
lot
mix
of
them in
requests.
every now and
Yeah,
then.
exactly.
Yeah, we
So
do.
this will be good for folks who maybe have gotten a homebrewing kit for their holidays and maybe have done one or two batches. This will be a good thing to kind of check them out and see what you've done wrong, what you've done right, and some tips and tricks and those types of things.
Absolutely.
Very good. So this week, I want to celebrate something. By the way, I just want to let you guys know that I am now a Cicerone certified beer server. Very excited.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you. Took that test and was really scared for a second, but I think I did okay. 90%. I was happy with that.
Pretty good.
Yes.
Pretty good.
Well done.
Thank you. So other than that, it's been pretty quiet for me. I've been crushing on a couple of beers. Tropicalia, of course, because it was warmer outside this week, and that's like kind of my garden beer. So I go out there and when I mow the lawn, do yard work, I got to have a Trop at the end of the day because the HOA was on me for my yard. And
Already?
so,
Had it grown
yes,
up
I have
enough
the
then
I have the
already?
worst HOA. Like they
yeah.
get on you like for nothing, and I'm like, really? It's just not even springtime yet. So yeah, I had to do that. So
Okay.
had to crack open a couple Trops after that, and Anti-Meridium. Hopefully we'll crack that open a little bit later on in the show. But yeah, that's a good beer too. What about you guys? You guys have again, you're doing your road trips.
We are.
all
We're
the
on
time.
our road trip, our Every Brewery in Georgia in 2018 trip, and we got to hit a few more last weekend. So we started the day at Three Taverns.
Mm-hmm.
Went over there, and they have a new IPA on from their what do they call that? Hop project?
Hop
or-
Leaf Project? Is
yeah,
that
the
what it
Hop
is?
Project. Kush.
So it's called
Yeah.
Kush, which I thought was phenomenal. Really dank. Some tropical notes on it. Just a really great beer. We went over to Blue Tarp, and that was my first time at Blue Tarp, actually.
Okay.
So went over and checked them out. Had a few beers there. Met Tom, the owner. He brought a can of Cherry's Jubilee out. A
Cool.
little sour cherry beer that was really nice. We went over to Wild Heaven, and I tried their house beer, and that's the one, Brian, that surprised me. It's a Helles Lager.
Okay.
And, how strong if you brew a Helles Lager, Mike, there at Twain's? What ABV would we fall in there?
4.5, 4.8.
Okay,
Yeah.
see, that's what I was expecting. So I get to drink, and I'm like, man, this has got a lot of flavor for this. If I remember right, it's like 7.2%.
Alrighty.
Yeah, it's
So,
it's north of 7.
for a house beer. So
More of a Helles Bock than a Helles Lager.
what's that?
More of a Helles Bock.
Yeah, it said Helles Lager. I was thinking, I didn't look at the ABV, just assumed, it was a lower one, and
Yeah.
not so much anyhow. So really good. So went over to Twain's. Went
Yeah.
over to Twain's, saw the
Appreciate seeing
guys
you
there.
there.
You bet, absolutely. And we celebrated Max Lager's 20th anniversary.
Now you've got a great story about Max Lagers.
I do.
Yeah.
Shared a couple times. Max Lagers was the first place I ever had craft beer in Georgia.
Okay.
Ever had Georgia brewed beer back in 1998.
So right when
I've
they
been
first opened.
I've been drinking there for right at the 20 years they've been open. So I thought that was pretty cool. Hung out with JR, had a good time. And we also got to check out IDC, the distillery.
Oh, yeah.
We went over there for them. They released a rye whiskey for their anniversary. And that was it. We made the rounds.
That's nice. That's nice. Brian's always, of course, up for a lot of crazy stuff too, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I tried over at Three Taverns that I thought was really intriguing and I didn't know if I'd like was O'Dilled. It was a special.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like a pickle sour or a dill
Okay.
sour.
Latin?
Yeah, yeah. O'Dilled.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I really liked it. It was really light.
We are safe for air right here, so you got to be
Yeah,
careful what
so-
you say. Yes.
I also enjoyed over at Max Lagers that Pritchard's rum barrel excommunication. That's delightful. Excommunication's wonderful, but that rum barrel's really nice. And I had a Dry County, and I'm not sure if I can say the name on air, but Darn It All Barley Wine.
There you
And
go.
After letting the bottle sit for a while, wow, that
Okay.
really got good.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, those guys are getting some good beers up there in Kennesaw, so it's always key. Let's go ahead and speaking of good beers, let's check out Truck and Tap's Beers of the Week.
Crack open a cold one. It's the Truck and Tap Beer of the Week. Craft beer and food trucks in downtown Woodstock. Truckandtap.com.
Lots of beers on the list there, Tim.
Lots of beers. So we got a little gift from Creature Comforts. Thank you so much. We have a can of their Lupulus IPA, which they did for Brick Store Pub's 20th anniversary. We also have a can of their Awaken My Love, I believe it's called, which is a breakfast stout that if you were at the Atlanta Cask Ale tasting, you may got a sample of the cask version there. We're also drinking one from Red Brick, which is Order of the Nine Gems, which is a Thai sour, which
it's interesting.
well, that's when I came in and I tried it. You're like, I want to know what you think of this. I like it. I think it's really good. It's unique. There's some good flavors in there, but I enjoy it. So.
Yeah, I thought it was really nice. It took me a couple of sips to kind of get into it, but it's almost like drinking Thai food. Well, I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but
Exactly.
I thought it was enjoyable.
See, you said that it tasted like maybe like eating a pad Thai to you.
Yeah, I actually think Becky said pad Thai, but
Well,
I
see,
hadn't
I didn't get
specified
that.
exactly what it was.
I get a little sweet, fruity, like coconutty nuttiness in there, but it didn't personally remind me of pad Thai. But
Okay.
But you do you, Becky. You do you.
There you go. Well, cool. Let's go ahead and get quickly into the headlines right now.
What's in the news? The beer guys have the scoop.
Extra, extra, read all about it.
Time for headlines.
Lots of stuff happening this week, Brian. Tell us about it.
So I got a ton of stuff here. Let's start really quick with a local roundup of events here. We've got Georgia Beer Company breaking ground on their brewery in Valdosta, Georgia. They're slated to open in late July or early August, and they're aiming to create beers that are to style but use Georgia ingredients whenever possible, and look for them to have a big Oktoberfest celebration later this year after they open. Arches has expanded their distribution fivefold, which means you'll be able to get their beer in places like Kroger, Whole Foods, and Target, only now it'll be across the entire state, not just places like Atlanta, Peachtree City, and Marietta. Red Hare is also expanding their capacity to up by 15%, that is, to keep up with demand. Apparently their Soft J IPA and Tangerine SPF 50/50 are really driving their brewing activity there, so that's look for more of that in the market.
Okay.
Wild Heaven offered free filtered water after a water main broke here in the Atlanta area, shutting off basically the complete water supply to DeKalb County. So all you had to do was show up with a container, and they gave you free filtered water, which I thought was a pretty neat thing.
Very cool. I saw a little earlier today that Second Self did that as well. They were giving away water to the community. So.
Yeah, and Mike, of course, works at Twain's, which is in Decatur, is affected by that too. You guys had a new glassware policy at Twain's for a little while, didn't you?
Yeah. So instead of having to wash all the glass because you'd have to sanitize it afterwards, we went with red solo cups. And
there you go.
We're boiling all our water and then serving on draft so that people can drink water while you're at the restaurant.
There you go. So, yes, it's...
something we all take really for granted.
Absolutely,
here.
yeah.
Having flowing water, and potable water and that. It's crazy.
Breweries are there for you when times get tough, right?
That's right.
So, switching gears, Tampa Bay Beer Week didn't quite go to plan by all reports. So, to begin with, Cycle canceled all of their daily bottle releases for the week. They had an issue with the Monday release where people were reporting off flavors in it, and so they checked into it and they said because everything was using all of the same equipment, all the same packaging, they didn't feel good about continuing with the rest of the releases, so they stopped that. And of course, that's going to push the lines up at other places around the city, like Angry Chair, which had at least 1,000 people lined up really early for a release of their beer. It's like 5 times the number of expected people lining up for a new bottle release. They were stopping traffic, angering the neighbors of Angry Chair. People were getting waken up before dawn by people standing in line waiting for a noon release of this beer. So it got pretty crazy.
Yeah.
So
and Angry Chair, if you haven't been there, it's in a neighborhood. It's like it's not in an industrial area or not. It's like it's right in the middle of some of homes and things like that.
I don't know where
too.
those people would even park.
No idea.
There's no parking.
Yeah,
really.
exactly.
And that's what Hunapoo's Day is this weekend, which is kind of the cornerstone of Tampa Beer Week. So all the events going on, bottle releases all week long, and then Hunapoo's Day.
Sure.
Yeah, so it's craziness for Atlanta for a Tampa Beer Week. So hopefully they'll get that solved.
Indeed. So another big item in the news this week was the president's proposed metal tariffs and how it could hurt the craft beer industry. So if you haven't heard, there's a proposal for a 10% tariff on aluminum and a 25% tariff on steel. Obviously, aluminum is what goes into cans, and steel goes into brewing equipment and kegs. So in one example that I saw all over the place, Oscar Blues is predicting they're going to lose about $400,000 this year on this. And another place is estimating it's a $347 million a year beer tax, effectively, that could end up to 20,000 jobs.
Yeah,
in the
I think
industry.
that's something we could talk about a lot, but we have to take a break right now. No more time to talk taxes. You're listening to the Beer Guys Radio Show, and we will be back right after this.
Craft beer forged with a reverence for tradition and new styles that start a revolution. Ironmonger Brewing. The brewers at Ironmonger Brewing pride themselves at being masters of barrel-aged, hoppy, and sour beers. They invite you to their taproom in Marietta to taste and see. Also, visit their barrel room with an intimate drinking experience with great live entertainment. Keep up to date on all things Ironmonger by liking them on Facebook. Ironmonger Brewing, establishing a new standard in craft beer.
We are Reformation Brewery, celebrating the reformer in you. Locally crafted within the renowned Etowah watershed of Woodstock, Georgia, Reformation creates yeast-forward brews full of aroma and flavor crafted to last. Come see us in beautiful Woodstock, Georgia, for a tour and tasting of unique brews that you can't find anywhere else. Reformation Brewery, set beer free. ReformationBrewery.com.
Follow the Beer Guys on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Oh, God, here we go again. Dork alert.
Now, back to the Beer Guys Radio Show.
And welcome back to the Beer Guys Radio Show, beerguysradio.com. We are live at the Monday Night Garage in Atlanta, Georgia. We've got lots of stuff going on. We're going to be talking about Day of the Juice here coming up in just a few minutes. But first, we are going to talk about some homebrewing techniques. Mike Castagno, as well as Nate Watkins, joins us in the studio today. Of course, Mike is the brewmaster of Twain's. Nate also is a brewer himself, a good home brewer. A darn good home brewer. Much better than I was going to say, much better than I would ever even hope to be. And Mike, of course, started off as an award-winning home brewer, too, before he went pro. So, guys, thanks so much for joining us today. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
Definitely.
Yeah,
Mike,
thanks.
is it Castagno or Castagno?
I've heard it both ways.
Yeah, okay, whatever rolls
the
off
Italian
the tongue.
Castagno.
Okay.
So the G and the N kind of work together just like lasagna.
Lasagna.
I'll get it next
Castagno.
time. Okay, there you go.
Now I want lasagna, Mike. Thanks a lot. So,
I'm hungry,
That's
too.
right.
So, guys, again, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. We've done a few homebrewing shows. We're going to focus on all flavors today. So talk about that. Something that if you've homebrewed, you've dealt with them at some time or another. And we're just going to go through a little bit of the info, kind of set up on the front end of what we're talking about here, and then tell people what some of these off flavors are, what causes them, and things they can do to avoid them. Absolutely. So, first of all, as we mentioned at the beginning of the show, both of you are Bjcp beer judges, and Mike, could you tell us a little bit about what Bjcp is and what being a certified or Grandmaster beer judge is about?
Sure thing. So Bjcp is the beer judging certification program, and it has a couple of different missions. One is to help educate the palate and homebrewers to work through tasting their beer so that you can appreciate it better. There's a difference between tasting an IPA and being able to pull out 16 different flavors in that IPA. Both are great things to do, but it helps you appreciate beer a little bit further. The second is to advance homebrewing as a hobby, and one way to do that is to be rewarding and be able to do it well and be able to execute on a high level. So what the Bjcp does is they train and test people who want to become judges and then certify competitions. So a homebrewer will enter a competition. They'll declare the beer style that they're trying to make. Let's say, for example, it's an English brown ale or a double IPA. Those beers will be separated into separate categories and then evaluated against peers other English brown ales or other double IPAs. And it's the judge's job to be able to determine how close to style those beers are, and as well as what the technical merit of that beer is.
So I'm curious, how long did it take you to become a Grandmaster Bjcp judge? Because I know there are people out there that are interested in going through that process. So I imagine it's quite a journey.
It was. I started judging in 2009, and I just advanced to Grandmaster a month ago. So that's
Wow, so like 10 years.
Almost a decade journey there. That's pretty impressive.
Yeah,
so, and people probably wouldn't realize, unless you sit down and you taste several beers that are trying to conform to the same style, it's difficult.
It is.
You know, we've done it at a homebrew level with about 6 different beers, and we thought, oh, this is going to be so fun and so great. Especially, there's a lot more good homebrew now than there was, a few years back. So
absolutely,
you're tasting them, and the differences become very subtle, and picking out any off flavors like we're talking about, or even critiques not to the style, becomes much more difficult.
Sure.
So you can learn and train to make that a little bit easier, I guess. Correct?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And when you think about beer and being to style, there's really 2 parts to that aspect. One is recipe. Are the malt, the hops, the yeast, and to a lesser extent the water, the right ingredients to make that beer? And if they're not, it's really hard to make it taste like the beer you're trying to make it taste like. The other side is the technical side. How did you mash? How did you boil? When did you add your hops, your chilling, your fermentation, packaging? And that's where most of your off flavors come in, is the fermentation and packaging.
Right. So, awesome info. Nate, question for you. So as we get rolling into talking about these off flavors here, what is something people can do before they even start brewing to try and minimize that risk?
One of the biggest recommendations that I think I would make is have your process set up so that you're not running around at the last minute, because that's when mistakes happen. Don't drink too heavily on your brew days, as much as we all want to.
Wow.
Darn it.
You'll make a better beer if you're sober.
Note to
What about
self.
relax? What's the quote? Relax, don't worry, have a homebrew.
Relax, don't worry.
There you go.
That's
Save
a lot
that
easier
for
if
the
you've had a
end
few
of the
beers.
Exactly.
process.
Well, keep in mind it says a homebrew.
Oh, is it just A? Oh, I missed the A part.
Not 19.
Okay.
But get your process figured out pretty early on. As long as you have kind of the different iterations of what you're going to be doing in which step, you'll be more inclined to be creating those better beers and minimizing those off flavors.
Yeah, and it's interesting because, in cooking and culinary school, you learn about mise en place, and you do the same kind of process, and you make sure that your onions are diced, and make sure your peppers are in, and everything's ready to go before you start doing it. And it makes sense to kind of, your process, you're organized, everything's, on a table outside, so you're not running around like a chicken with your head cut off, and you can forget something pretty easily.
And beyond that, one of the easiest ways to avoid off flavors is healthy fermentation. So a week before you're brewing, plan ahead and make sure that you have a healthy yeast starter, for example.
So my yeast starter that's been in there for like 6 months, probably not great.
You may regret that.
Right.
Okay, that's good to know. I'll get a new one. Okay, that's right.
All right, guys, let's get into some of these fantastic off flavors. We have a lot to talk about here. Probably not get to everything we want to today, but a few that we're going to try and cover that I think a lot of homebrewers probably notice and may run into are like acetaldehyde, diacetyl, DMS. We'll talk about skunking and oxidation some. So I'm just going to hit the alphabet here, Mike.
Sure.
And we're going to start with acetaldehyde. Is that the correct way to pronounce that, first of all?
There's 2 ways to pronounce it. It's acetaldehyde. Sorry, I can't say it.
See?
Okay.
Right.
I say it acetaldehyde.
Okay.
But yeah, either way is fine.
And we should throw out, but that prior to your brewing career, you are a chemist engineer and an engineer.
That's right.
So you do know a little thing about chemicals and the way they react with stuff, right?
Sometimes.
Okay, good deal. So acetaldehyde, what is it, and what causes that one?
So acetaldehyde is basically the precursor in fermentation. When yeast break down your maltose, that's what you make during mashing, is basically sugar from malt. It's a disaccharide, which means there's 2 sugar molecules bonded to each other. During fermentation, yeast break that down into alcohol. One of the steps in between that sugar and alcohol is acetaldehyde. It's the step right before it turns into alcohol. And so what generally happens from acetaldehyde, there's really 2 ways to get there. It's to stop before you get to alcohol. So that is the 98% of the time. That's how you get acetaldehyde, is from an unhealthy fermentation. I always like to refer to fermentation as you're a manager of your factory workers. So your yeast are your factory workers. If you put too much work on them for too long and they're not healthy enough, they can't eat enough, they're just kind of starved, they stop working, they don't make great products. So in that terms, if you don't have enough yeast, you don't have enough oxygen at the start of fermentation, what will happen is they just don't convert all the acetaldehyde into alcohol, and it gets left over. And you might say, well, there's alcohol in the beer. I can tell from the hydrometer, everything looks good. But the thing is, you can perceive acetaldehyde at 25 ppb.
Okay. Yeah.
Maybe a little higher than that, maybe 25 ppm. So that's a very, very small amount. It's a very easy thing to perceive. So you just need a good, healthy fermentation. And then the other issue that sometimes people try to get impatient and transfer the beer too early. When you transfer the beer too early, the yeast hasn't had a time to reduce the acetaldehyde into ethanol.
Because there's more to the process of fermentation than just eat sugar, make alcohol.
Absolutely.
I mean, there's a lot of cleanup process in there, like you mentioned, a couple other things as well that will be reduced with a proper fermentation.
Right.
That's more than just getting alcohol out of your beer.
Yeah, so one of the biggest single sentence things to learn how to get better at brewing beer is be patient.
Right.
If you think it's ready, wait another day.
Yeah, patience is always good. You always want to see it. You're seeing it bubbling. You're like, oh, it's awesome. It's ready to go. The box says I need a week, and then you do it. But yeah, you got to give it time to do its job. And if you don't do that, then off flavors can happen.
Mike, where are some of the most common places that you're going to taste acetaldehyde?
It's actually kind of hard to taste
in your beer.
Hey, or in your mouth.
Tastes like acetaldehyde.
Or there are some styles that are more prone to have it than others, like say a lot of lagers.
Yeah, there's a light beer that has acetaldehyde in it. Can we name?
Sure,
absolutely. Call them out.
So Bud Light has acetaldehyde in it.
Mm-hmm.
So if you just taste that beer clean, you can pick up a little bit of the apple character. So acetaldehyde is referred to as green apple. That's not really a very accurate perception. I think when people describe it as green apple, what they mean is that it's an unripened apple. Almost every unripe fruit has acetaldehyde in it because during ripening you're fermenting the sugar and creating alcohol. Very, very small amounts, but still. So unripe fruit almost always has acetaldehyde in it.
Excellent. Well, cool. We're going to take a quick break right now. We'll be back with Mike Castagno and Nate Watkins. We'll be talking more about off flavors. Beer Guys Radio, beerguysradio.com. We'll be back right after this.
Time for the hot list. The beer guys have the scoop on what you need to know for next week.
That's hot.
And we have got a lot of great stuff going on this week in Georgia beer. On Sunday, we have Kegs and Eggs at Terrapin. Atlanta United plays DC United. There'll be a watch party right here at Monday Night Garage. On Monday, Aaron, did you know that Jekyll now roasts their own coffee?
I did know that, actually.
Yeah,
that's
so
very
they
cool.
have the Jekyll Coffee Lab there, and they want people to check it out. So on Monday morning, they're going to have a free morning coffee there at Jekyll for their Jekyll Coffee Lab. It's also the Coalition Food and Beverage pop-up at Variant Brewing. So they don't have food service there normally, but they do little pop-up events. They also have a special beer they're going to be putting on for that. On Tuesday, it is Lit. Books, booze, and beats. Again at Monday Night Garage. What a week.
Those guys are crazy
Monday
over
Night
there.
Garage.
Exactly.
So, and also, again, at Jekyll, they're doing oil, vinegar, malt, and hops, where they're going to be tasting balsamic vinegars and olive oils, and this is a BYOF event.
Bring your own
food.
Ah, gotcha.
They said bring salads or charcuterie or whatever to pair with the oils, but come check it out. On Wednesday in Savannah, we have Service Brewing beer tasting at Smith Brothers Butcher Shop. And over in Augusta, it is Pie Day celebration at Savannah River Brewing Company. On Thursday, Airbrush Daydreams releases at Red Brick Brewing, and that is a Myrtle Beach style
Okay.
IPA. So you know what? Go to Red Brick and find out what that means. So, and we're also going to be taping our show there.
That's right.
Next
Yeah,
week,
we're gonna
talking
be
to
there.
Red Brick. We'll be there next Thursday. So we also have at Ironmonger Brewing, you can learn to make your beer money go further with their Budgets and Brews event. And Boulevard's going to have a brewer in town, and they are hosting Meet the Brewer events at Barley Garden up in Alpharetta. On Friday, you can get an early start on your St. Patrick's Day celebrations. Pretoria Fields is going to have an event going on. Or, you know what, you can enjoy some Kung Fu, Aaron. And Kung Fu is an electro, jazz, funk group with some EDM influence. They're a quintet, and they're going to be playing at Southbound Brewing.
Alrighty then.
Right?
Yeah, all right.
I'm telling you, though. So Saturday, it's St. Patrick's Day, Aaron. Do you know, Brian,
Okay.
you know, there are over 40 events across the state of Georgia.
Oh, I know.
On St. Patrick's Day. And I'm guaranteeing you there's a few that we missed.
Oh, for sure. Absolutely.
So you could party all day long. If you went to
Absolutely.
one event every 45 minutes, you could fill up the whole clock. So
With
plenty
two to
to
spare.
do, right, with some to spare. So there's plenty going on. It is absolutely the holiest of holy days for beer drinkers.
true.
So go out. You can check out Sewanee Beer Fest over in Sewanee, and also Lucky Fest at Park Tavern, or visit your local Irish pub, or pretty much just go anywhere at all that serves beer, and there's guaranteed to be a party. We definitely encourage you to check out our full calendar of events at beerguysradio.com, because, Aaron, there was just too much for us to cover here, and you can get the full scoop on our site.
Follow the Beer Guys on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Well, I'm sure I'd feel much worse if I weren't under such heavy sedation.
Now, back to the Beer Guys Radio Show.
And welcome back to the Beer Guys Radio Show. Check us out at beerguysradio.com. We are talking homebrew off flavors today. We have Mike Castagno and we have Nate Watkins with us. We've been talking about acetaldehyde, and we're going to get a little info right now from Michael Lowenberg. He is with Modern Hops Distribution, and they're going to have a beer festival here very soon at Monday Night Garage, where
Right
we're
here.
taping tonight, right here at the garage. And Michael's going to tell us a little bit about this event. So, Michael, what is Day of the Juice about?
Day of the Juice is going to be probably the first festival ever in Georgia had by, it is the first festival ever by a distributor. And it's also going to be the first festival at a brewery that is going to be showcasing other beers. The idea for us is to bring in all kinds of awesome IPAs and also all things juice from all over the country to folks in Georgia who have never had the chance to try it before. So it is a little bit geared towards kind of the underground beer scene. It's not a lot of necessarily mainstream or well-known breweries, but it's a lot of guys who we've tried and who we've either traveled to or traded for, things of that nature. So what we're trying to do is essentially bring in beers that you cannot get otherwise and give you a really unique VIP type experience.
Yeah, and
So
like, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I'm getting by the name Day of the Juice. There's a theme here, right?
So the theme originally was to bring in elite IPAs, but due to things like palate fatigue and things like that, we decided it'd be better to bring in some other beers as well. So we're going to have some good barrel-aged stouts, some pastry stouts. We're going to have some really crazy ciders, fruited ciders. We're going to have a cherries and vanilla cider, a bananas and Luxardo cherry cider. We're going to have some great mead from Superstition and our local guys, B-Craft and Etowah, and a lot of heavily fruited sours and some really cool sorbet-type Berliner Weisses with some that are actually focused kind of on cocktails. So we're going to have like a painkiller Berliner Weiss, which is, coconut and pineapple and a whole bunch of really good stuff. So
Well, for those that want those juicy IPAs,
we're
going to
have plenty
of
of
those.
those. We're going to have, it's going to be mainly IPAs. The majority is, I think, 35 to 40, maybe 45 IPAs, and it'll be mixed up with all kinds of other stuff. So you'll be able to try a little bit of everything, and you'll get some juicy IPAs, some West Coast IPAs, some hazy IPAs, the whole gamut.
Very cool. Now, Michael, if people want to know more about this, and when is the festival, and where do people go to get more info or get tickets?
So the festival will be Saturday, March 31st, which is the day before Easter. Sorry. And
it happens sometimes.
you will break your Lenten fast if you had that going on.
And it's going to be at Monday Night Garage. It's actually at the facility on the back half, so the regular half will be open for business. So if you come and you got a ticket, come to the back half. There'll be signs to point you in that direction. And if you want to check us out. Follow Modern Hops on Facebook or Instagram. And for specific information about the festival, where you can also buy T-shirts and posters, please go to www.dayofthejuice.com.
Awesome. Thanks for the info, Michael. We're looking forward to it.
I appreciate that. You put http:// before that too, right? Is that
no? You don't.
These days,
Most
you don't.
No.
Okay.
Matter of fact, you can just do WWE, WWF, whatever.
Oh, okay, good. That's
WWE wrestling. Are we talking wrestling now? All right.
I'm a little bit behind the times.
Well,
listen. I mean, that's on you, not me. That's it.
So all flavors.
Yes, all
right?
flavors. I'm sorry. Yes.
So, yeah. So all right. So we're wrapping up there. Mike, anything else we want to add on the acetaldehyde discussion?
Sure. Just to close that out, I'd say from my experience judging beer on the homebrew level, it's an incredibly common thing. I think for one, it tends to hide with a lot of other flavors, so people might not perceive it. But that's one that I'd recommend you focus on if you're trying to clean up your beers and get them a little bit more presentable. Acetaldehyde is one of the most common ones.
Okay.
And if you are a beginning homebrewer, I guess you guys have, of course, been really popular or worked with homebrew clubs and those types of things. Those type of people can help you kind of figure out if you've got some off flavors too. If you're a starting homebrewer, don't necessarily know a lot of these terms, it may be good to join a homebrew club and they can help you out.
Definitely join a homebrew club. We do produce the occasional really good professional brewer.
Right. Yeah.
But come check out Cover Hops. We meet the third Tuesday of every month. We got a website, email list, Facebook group, all the jazz. There are others around town. We just wrapped up.
Nate's saying around town. We're talking Atlanta here. This is Atlanta. Covert Hops is an Atlanta-based homebrew club. So
but across the country,
Atlanta, you can come out and check them out.
Or check out whatever's local to you.
Yeah,
there you go.
Absolutely. Good deal. So, guys, the next all-flavor one that I'm sure we've all tasted before in a beer, Diacetyl. So, in that, my experience with it can be buttery or butterscotchy or something to give you a slick mouthfeel. So, what is Diacetyl? What causes it?
So it's kind of a broken record here. It's almost the exact same issue with acetaldehyde. Diacetyl is a compound that gets produced by all yeast. Some strains make more than others. I think most people are familiar with English yeast making a lot of diacetyl. Belgian yeast makes very little. Lager strains make a whole lot as well. But diacetyl is produced during fermentation. It's driven by heat. So the hotter you ferment, the more you produce. But towards the end of fermentation, the warmer it is, the quicker it gets reduced. So lagers tend to have diacetyl because even though you make less, it's harder to get rid of.
Because you ferment at the cooler temperatures.
Right. So as the metabolism of the yeast starts going down because there's less food available, it's harder to reduce diacetyl. But it's very similar to acetaldehyde. It gets reduced if you have a healthy fermentation, if you have a lot of yeast, a lot of oxygen available during the beginning of fermentation, in order to help build up your cells.
And that's something that if you do lagers, they call a diacetyl rest, but you bump the temperature up a few degrees and let it kind of push it out, correct?
Yeah. That is a technique for sure.
Okay.
It's the more common one with homebrewers. Professional brewers, some do it, some don't. It's not necessary if you have the right amount of yeast, but it's a nice safety mechanism.
But if you think you're done, but you still taste it there, that would be one way that might correct it if it is to pump the temperature up a little bit.
So the catch with diacetyl is the precursor to diacetyl. It's called acetolactate, but that's not really important. You can't taste it. It's
okay.
And if you don't get rid of that, it oxidizes into diacetyl. And that normally happens during your transfers. You have a rack and cane, a tube into another carboy or a keg or bottling bucket. And that's where you start introducing a whole lot of oxygen. You never tasted the diacetyl in the beer, per se, but after you transfer, it oxidizes that acetolactate, and now you have diacetyl when you didn't before.
But unlike acetaldehyde, diacetyl is appropriate in some beer styles and more beer styles.
Sure.
Mike alluded to the fact that it's in a lot of English beer styles because English yeasts tend to produce a lot. And there is a fairly broad range of diacetyl flavors. Some do range from really bad rancid or popcorn butter, but some come through as kind of butterscotch toffee, depending on what your other ingredients are. So it's not quite as off-putting as some of the other off flavors.
I've got that buttered popcorn taste before,
Yeah.
And I do not have a low threshold. My palate personally, you could probably put a stick of butter in some beers. I'd be like, I don't get any butter flavor in this. So that's you got some right there.
Yeah,
but Brian, you're pretty sensitive to that.
I'm fairly sensitive to it. Yeah. That acetaldehyde, or how did we decide we're pronouncing it? Acetaldehyde?
Right,
yeah. I
Close
picked
enough.
that up pretty quickly if it's in there. A couple of those. So let's talk about DMS. Was it dimethyl sulfate? Nate, tell us about that. What is that? And
So
where does it come
DMS is
from?
another one of those precursor off flavors, but it's not from fermentation. This is from the grain itself. It is a natural part of the malting process, and it's in pretty much any barley that you buy. Most barley malt these days doesn't have much DMS, if any at all. Modern techniques are a lot better for getting rid of it, but it's still something that you want to avoid, and it's extremely easy to avoid. DMS is kind of the most common descriptor is cooked corn, but that's not quite right. Think like overcooked cabbage, overcooked, blah, blah, blah.
I hate blah, blah, blah.
Oh, that's the worst.
I was going to say corned beef and
that's one of my
cabbage is pretty
favorites.
nice, though, if it's not overcooked.
But the only thing you need to do to get rid of it is make sure that you have a rolling boil for kind of the general principle is 60 minutes. But one of the kind of questions that we had talked about before the show was, is that really necessary these days? And the question is probably not. Now, where exactly that line is, you'll probably read different things. I still recommend a 60-minute boil. Mike may have something else to say about that.
So do you a long boil and don't cover your beer. Let that stuff get out of there, correct? So, all right.
Okay.
You're listening to the Beer Guys Radio Show. Follow us on the socials, Beer Guys Radio on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. We're going to take a quick break, but we will be back in just a moment to talk more about homebrewing off flavors.
It's Aaron and Tim, the Beer Guys. If you're like us, no lunch or dinner is complete without a pint or two of craft beer.
Which is why Truck and Tap in downtown Woodstock and Alpharetta are always on our list. Tim, why do they call it Truck and Tap?
Well, the tap part is easy, Aaron. See, they've got 18 of them.
As for the truck part, well, that's when it gets interesting. Truck and Tap features your favorite Atlanta area food trucks daily, so that way you're getting a different menu every day.
Truck and Tap in downtown Woodstock, Alpharetta, and coming soon to Duluth in 2018. Truckandtap.com. Let them know that the Beer Guys sent you.
Follow the Beer Guys on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Your revolution is over, Mr. Lebowski. Condolences, the bum's lost.
Now, back to the Beer Guys Radio Show.
And welcome back to the Beer Guys Radio Show. BeerGuysRadio.com is our website, and we are talking off flavors and homebrewing with Mike Castagno. He is the brewmaster of Twain's, and Nate Watkins, an awesome homebrewer, award-winning homebrewer, I would say. They join us in the studio today. Of course, our studio here is the Monday Night Garage. So oxidation.
Oxidation.
That's what I'm trying to see. Again, you guys are the brewers. I'm just the guy who talks and drinks beer. So I'm segmenting it today.
You are segmenting it.
Yeah,
Yes.
so oxidation, I've had it before. Tell us about oxidation, how to prevent that.
In a nutshell, oxidation, from a flavor perspective, it can take one of two forms. We're not going to go too far into it, but it could either be stale cardboard, kind of wet paper, or it could be kind of those sherry flavors, those dark fruit type things. But how do you get it? That's the thing we want to target. There are a number of places in the process. It's all process-oriented. And it could be hot side, cold side. Those are a little harder to parse. But probably the biggest place that it comes from is packaging. How are you packaging? Are you practicing good techniques with your racking? Are you avoiding introducing too much oxygen into that on the far end? Do you have too much headspace in your bottle? How cool are you storing your bottles? Stuff like that. So kind of the recommendation is avoid agitating your beer too much. Avoid having too much headspace, whether in secondary, primary, or in bottles, and keep your final product cool, whether you're bottling or kegging. Just make sure that you don't have too many temperature fluctuations. And,
So after fermentation is complete, handle with care. Don't slosh, don't splash. Fill your bottles properly. if you're bottle conditioning, get them conditioned and store them cool.
That's basically it.
All right, guys. Another one we want to talk about here is something that I'm sure every beer drinker has tasted, skunking.
Oh, yeah.
And this is something that may not be related so much. Well, it can be related to the brew process and how you store your carboy. So what is the skunk that we taste, and how do homebrewers keep from getting it in their beers?
Well, Skunk Flavors is actually also referred to as light struck for obvious reasons, because it happens from light. So 9 times out of 10, if you get something off the shelf that has a skunky character, it's going to be in a clear or green bottle. So the brown bottles actually block the UV light that causes that reaction to happen. So brown bottles are really important. And then carboys, if you're using glass, making sure you store them in a closet or in a refrigerator or covered with something to make sure that light doesn't get in. It's a reaction with hop chemicals. So when the light hits it, it skunks.
And it's
one common misconception is you cannot get a light struck beer from the boil. It's only after fermentation.
Okay, and so you can, if you've got your boil setting out in the sun and you got your isomerized hops in there, you can skunk during the boil.
You cannot.
You cannot. That is okay. You cannot. So, and the reason it's called skunk, the chemical that's created is identical or similar, Mike, in chemical composition to a skunk spray, right?
That's right. There's a class of chemicals called thiols, and a subclass of that called mercaptans. So it's a mercaptan. It smells like if you run over a dead skunk. You know, that brilliantly wonderful.
Yes, there
skunkiness.
are certain bottles, beers that are in glass bottles or green glass bottles that you've probably had that
Go
skunky
pick
flavor
up a
too.
Heineken or a Corona and you'll figure it out.
Check it out. And that's why you shove a lime in it,
That's
right?
right, exactly.
All right, guys, we want to move on here. One more group that we want to cover here, and these can actually be desirable in certain beers, but esters and phenols. So kind of what causes those, what brings them into the beers, and when would they be welcome or unwelcome?
So esters and phenols are both byproducts of fermentation, right, Nate?
Yeah.
And part of it has to do with the yeast strain that you use. So that's one part. There are some yeasts that are clean, some yeasts that produce more esters and or phenols. But all things being equal, if you start from the same yeast strain, if you ferment really warm, you're going to get more esters. If you ferment with low amounts of oxygen, you're going to get more esters. And if you don't add enough yeast, you're also going to get more esters.
Now, for an idiot like me, what does it actually an ester taste like? Is it a fruit? Is it kind of what is that?
For the most part, it's fruity. So it's a class of compounds. It's a chemical structure, but most of those chemicals smell fruity.
Mm-hmm.
You can actually get some really bad ones, like acetone is an ester.
That would not be good in my beer.
That's like nail polish, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
That would not be good.
So basically, you're tasting the stress of the yeast when you're talking about.
Sorry, go ahead.
So basically, you're tasting the stress of the yeast when you're tasting esters, and it tastes like things like bananas, right?
Yeah, bananas generally considered an off flavor, except Hefeweizen. Otherwise,
and some Belgians.
Yeah, that's debatable.
There we go.
I would say some
that.
triples. I kind of expect it from some triples, but maybe that's not what it should be.
Yeah, generally that's a stress fermentation that shouldn't be done that way.
Mike said you're wrong, Brian.
It's not uncommon. But
Agree to disagree.
Look, there's one master Bjcp judge around here, and that's this guy, not you. Grandmaster. Grandmaster Poobah person.
But like
anyway,
we were talking about English beers earlier.
Did you just call him the Grand Poobah?
I did, actually. I did.
But a lot of English beers may have a little bit of an apple or pear ester going on, as another example.
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
a Kolsch can get a pear note in it, correct? Yeah. So it's a beer like that, right?
White grape.
White grape?
Yeah.
It's a huge class of families, and there's a huge range of acceptable and non-acceptable.
So it's in moderation. A little bit's good, a lot's too much.
So phenols, though, what are we talking about with those?
That's a lot more complex. Phenols is also a chemical structure. Generally, that's from yeast fermentation, usually Belgian yeast. So you get that spicy, peppery. Sometimes you get clove from like Hefeweizen yeast, but most of the other phenols are actually off flavors, things like rubber, Band-Aid, electrical tape. Those are undesirable, and those are almost always due to infections, wild yeast.
We brew a lot of Saison. Well, we brewed, I guess, last time we got a chance to brew. But you can select your yeast and your temperatures depending on if you want more of a phenolic or more of an estery
Sure.
Variety there. And saisons, that's one you can really divert the flavor profile a lot with yeast selection and temperature. When we ferment ours, we ferment it at 90 degrees.
Oh, wow.
We take it way up there, and it just gets
You could teach a week-long class on yeast selection and temperature.
Oh, sure.
And how to get your flavors.
It's a lot of fun to mess around with your homebrew and kind of mess with temperatures and that. Guys, thanks so much for talking to us. We got to move on there,
Thanks
but
for
I think
having
we
us.
covered everything we wanted to. Maybe briefly, but we did it.
We'll have to come back to this.
We'll do it
Homebrewing
again.
topics are usually pretty popular requests, so we'll do some more homebrewing stuff.
Absolutely.
Sounds good. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
All right, let's go ahead and give away some stuff. Tim, who is the lucky winner this week?
Our winner this week is Erica Kirkendall.
Sure.
Erica Kirkendall. Erica, thank you so much for subscribing to our newsletter. Drop us an email to beerguys@beerguysradio.com, and we're going to get you a very cool swag pack. Now, Aaron, if others want to join in the fun, get good info, win cool prizes, how would they do that?
Oh, just go to beerguysradio.com, sign up for This Week in Georgia Beer. You'll get a weekly newsletter with all the happenings in Georgia Beer. You'll also be entered to win our weekly swag pack. And coming up next week, we've got a great show. I'm pretty excited about this one, actually. Red Brick Brewing. It's Atlanta's oldest currently operating craft brewery, and they've been doing some great stuff, including the beer that you're about to open right now.
I have No New Friends here, which is a Red Brick beer.
Exactly. A collaboration with our friends at Wrecking Bar, too. So we'll be there. Of course, check us out at beerguysradio.com and on the socials. Day of the Juice Festival, that's coming up at the end of the month. Go ahead and go to dayofthejuice.com for all the tickets and details. Trust me, if you're a hophead like myself, or even if you're not, it's going to be one of an awesome festival. So check that out. Also, too, we're going to be at beerguysradio.com and on the socials. So don't forget to drink local. Cheers, and we will talk to you next week.